The town of Hollow's End was the sort of place where nothing ever changed. Its cobblestone streets wound like old veins between rows of crooked cottages, their thatched roofs sagging under decades of rain. Autumn had settled in early that year, draping the woods in a shroud of copper and rust. The air smelled of damp earth and wood smoke, and the nights grew long and still, as though the world itself were holding its breath. Clara had only just moved to Hollow's End, fleeing the clamor of the city with her father after her mother's death. Their new home, a creaking Victorian perched at the edge of the woods, had seemed quaint in the daylight. But as the sun dipped below the tree line on their first evening, Clara felt the weight of the house's silence. It wasn't empty silence. It was the kind that hummed, low and insistent, like a swarm of bees trapped behind the walls. The willow tree stood in the backyard, its skeletal branches clawing at Clara's bedroom window. Her father had laughed when she mentioned it. "Just a tree," he'd said, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling it was watching her. At night, its shadow stretched across her floor, thin fingers grazing the edge of her bed. She began sleeping with the curtains drawn. The first strange thing happened a week later. Clara was walking home from school, her boots crunching through drifts of dead leaves. The path through the woods was a shortcut the other children avoided. "Bad luck," they muttered, though none would say why. Clara didn't believe in superstitions, not yet. But as the trees closed in around her, the light fading to a murky green, she heard it. A whisper, soft and sibilant, threading through the wind. "Clara!" She froze. The voice had come from nowhere and everywhere, a sound like dry paper brushing skin. When she turned, the woods were empty, yet the air felt heavier, thick with the scent of rot. She ran the rest of the way home, her pulse thrumming in her ears. That night she dreamed of the willow. In the dream, she stood beneath its branches, which swayed gently despite the windless air. Something pale dangled among the leaves, a doll, perhaps, its porcelain face cracked and smeared with dirt. But as Clara squinted, the doll's head twitched, its eyes rolled open, milky and unblinking, and its mouth stretched into a grin too wide for its face. She woke to the sound of scratching, slow, deliberate scrapes against her window pane. When she dared to peek through the curtains, the willow's branches were still, but etched into the fogged glass were 3 jagged lines like claw marks. The next morning, Clara found an old book in the attic. Its leather cover was embossed with a symbol, a willow tree, its roots coiled around a human skull. Inside, yellowed pages detailed local folklore. One passage made her blood run cold. "Beware the whisperer in the willow, she who walks where shadows linger. Her face is a mask of sorrow, her voice a serpent's hymn. She calls to the lonely, the lost, the grieving, and when she beckons, none may refuse." Clara slammed the book shut. Nonsense, she told herself, just stories. But that afternoon, as she passed the woods, she saw her. A woman stood between the trees, her gown the color of bone. Her face was hidden beneath a porcelain mask, smooth and expressionless, save for 2 dark holes where eyes should be. She held one skeletal hand aloft, fingers curled as though beckoning. Clara's breath hitched, the woman's head tilted slowly, and then she was gone, vanished into the gloom like smoke. The whispers grew louder. They seeped under doors, slithered through keyholes. "Come, Clara, come see." Sometimes they sang, a lullaby her mother had hummed long ago. Clara stopped sleeping. She took to wandering the house at night, flashlight in hand, jumping at every creak. Her father dismissed it as grief. "It's just the house settling," he said, but his eyes avoided hers. One frost-bitten midnight, Clara followed the voice. It led her to the willow. Moonlight bled through its branches, casting a lattice of shadows on the ground. At the tree's base lay a hole, black and yawning, its edges lined with gnarled roots. The whispers swarmed now, urgent, hungry. Down, down, down. Clara knelt. The hole exhaled a dank, fungal breath. She shone her flashlight inside and screamed. A child's skeleton lay curled in the dirt, its tiny fingers clutching a porcelain mask. The police found nothing. No hole, no bones. "Overactive imagination," the sheriff chuckled, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. The townsfolk avoided Clara after that. She saw them muttering behind their hands, crossing the street when she approached. Only old Mrs. Greer, who lived in the cottage by the cemetery, would speak to her. "The Whisperer's chosen you," the woman rasped, her knobby fingers clutching Clara's wrist. "She feeds on sorrow. The more you fear, the stronger she grows. Only way to be rid of her is to face her. But mind you don't look at her face. Ain't no one survives that." Clara didn't believe her. Not until the night the lights went out. A storm raged, howling through the cracks in the house. Clara huddled in her room, candle flickering, when the whispers erupted, a chorus now, deafening, maddening. The window shattered, the willow's branches lashed inward, dripping with black sap. And there, framed in the broken glass, stood the Whisperer. Her mask was gone. Clara's scream died in her throat. The woman's face was a shifting void, a whirlpool of shadows where features should be. It pulled at Clara, dizzying as though her very soul were being unraveled. She stumbled back, clutching the old book to her chest like a shield. The Whisperer hissed, a sound like steam escaping a coffin, and dissolved into the dark. At dawn, Clara went to the willow with a shovel. She dug until her blisters burst, until the hole gaped wide and deep. There, buried beneath the roots, was a tin box. Inside lay a lock of hair, a faded photograph, and a letter. "Forgive me," it read. "I could not let them take her. Better the willow than the grave. She sings sometimes, my little Eleanor. Can you hear her?" The photograph showed a girl in a white dress, her face blurred. The lock of hair was strawberry blonde, the same shade as Clara's. The whispers began again, but now they wept. "Mama, Mama, it's cold." Clara turned. The Whisperer stood behind her, mask restored. This time her hand did not beckon. It pointed, trembling, toward the woods. Clara ran. She ran until her lungs burned, until the trees blurred into a smear of gray. When she collapsed, she was at the edge of the cemetery. Mrs. Greer's cottage loomed ahead, its windows dark. The grave was small, half swallowed by weeds. The headstone read, "Eleanor Greer, beloved daughter, 1892 to 1899. Behind Clara, dry leaves crackled. She didn't need to look to know the Whisperer was there, her sorrow a living thing, thick enough to choke on. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered. The mask clattered to the ground. Clara did not look. She felt cold fingers brush her cheek, lighter than cobwebs, and then nothing. They found Clara's shovel by the willow, her footprints trailing into the woods. But Clara herself was never seen again. Sometimes, on still autumn nights, the people of Hollow's End hear it, a child's laughter tangled with a woman's weeping, drifting from the depths of the woods. And in their dreams they see the willow, its branches hung not with leaves, but with masks. So many masks, each one waiting for a face to claim it. But that's just a story, of course, isn't it?